Okay, we're recording. Dun dun dun. Okay, I'm gonna share screen here. Okay, so to to today. We're gonna start Photoshop, but there's like one or two things in Illustrator that I'd never fit into any other lessons. And they're kind of important. Shouldn't take long, but we'll go over those. And then and I actually brought my notes. I brought my notes today. Lots of notes. I don't know if we'll get to everything, but it's gonna be a lot of technical information because we're working in Photoshop and we really need to get to know things like file formats. We're dealing with no more vectors, although you can do vectors in Photoshop. They have incorporated some vector capabilities. But we're talking about bitmap images now. We're talking about pixels and resolution. So far, we've been working in what's called resolution independent. So you can take your vector files, blow them up as large as you want, and you're still going to have nice clean edges and clean gradients and no banding, no artifacts. We got to think differently in Photoshop. We really have to consider the fidelity of our images in Photoshop. But let's just get this Illustrator stuff out of the way. Don't really have an example file for this, but I'm going to go to, where'd my Illustrator go? Illustrator's gone.
I hate it. I'm so
Oh, it was you again.
yeah.
Illustrator 2024. Okay. Opening Illustrator. Come on now.
I only feel slightly bad that I
I don't think you feel bad at all.
yeah, I knew that.
Yeah. Why is Illustrator taking so long? Okay, here we go. Here's a little Illustrator screen. Okay, so in Illustrator, when I've been oh, it crashed. That's why. We'll just cancel that. Okay. Get out of there. So we've been working in just like, here's one file, here's another file, here's another file, all different files. Maybe they're in tabs or something like that. But you can have, and those are called artboards, and you can have multiple artboards. So I'm going to start a new file. I'm going to choose letter. I'm going to choose letter in the portrait orientation. And if you've paid attention to this little dialog box, when you open something up, you can set the bleed. So, the boundaries, bleed is when the artwork actually goes across the boundary of the physical paper. I'm not going to worry about that for right now. And then there's this option here called artboards. And right now it's set to 1. I'm going to leave it at 1 for now because I want to show you the artboard tool. So I'm going to create this file. Create. Okay. Okay. I have 1 artboard and I zoom out and I have all this gray empty space around it. You can always, just dump stuff off to the side that, if you're sketching and you don't like this, but you don't want to delete it, just put it off to the side. Nothing wrong with that. But we can have more than one artboard. And to do this, there are a couple, well, different ways to do it. There's an artboard tool over here in the toolbar, and looks like a page with some little crosshairs in the upper left corner. You can click on that, or the shortcut is Shift O. Shift O, like you're typing a capital O. Okay, I just typed a Shift O. I'm gonna move this bar out of the way. I need to just get rid of that bar. I never use it. So now we can see this whole artboard. First of all, it has a name called Artboard 1. That's the default, and O1 is what it starts with. And it's got handles, so I could stretch it out and change the shape. Or up here, there's a width and a height. I could, it says it's set to points right now. I prefer working in inches, but I could type in the letters IN for inches, and Illustrator would figure out, what I wanted and convert it to points. But what if you want more than one? Oops, I didn't mean to do that. One artboard. Well, once you're in this artboard tool mode, I'm just going to pan over a little bit. I've got this cursor right here selected. I can click and drag and make another artboard. Once I do that, I can, there's a drop down menu up here with all different sizes that I could set it to. So I could set it to letter, legal, or iPhone X, or Apple Watch, or some television screen sizes, or film. So many options. I'm going to close this one. So I'm just clicking on it and deleting it. And if you're making something like, uh, if you're making something like, a multi-page, document. So if you're going to export this as a PDF that had a page 1 and a page 2 and a page 3, one easy way is to just click and drag, hold down Option to copy it. You can even hold down Shift if you want to line them up nicely. You don't have to, but I like to. And then now I have two artboards. So the first one says O1, the second one says O2. Sometimes it's a good idea to name your artboards. So if I go to Window, I go down here to Artboards, I get the artboard dialog box here, and I can switch back and forth between these two. I think I can I make them invisible? No, I can't. Let me just zoom out again. But then I could double click on this and give it a name. Why would you want to do that? Well, maybe you have a lot of individual pieces of art, illustrations. What I'm going to show you next is how to export your artboards, and if you give them names, then they'll automatically retain those names in the files that get saved to your computer, which is very handy. And then you don't have to go into each one and rename it in in your operating system. So let's put some art on these artboards. I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna do some stars here. I'm gonna do that one. I'm gonna make this one red. I'm gonna do another one here and make this one blue. Okay, very patriotic. Okay. So right now I have two artboards. I double clicked out onto the gray area, so it took me out of the artboard tool. So I'm not using that anymore. And as I click on these, if you see over in the artboard panel, it's showing me that I have this one selected, I have this one selected. So if I were to just save, or so many different ways to do this, I could go File, Save As, and it always asks you if you want to save to the cloud, to the Creative Cloud. That is up to you. It might be helpful, if you work back and forth, like sometimes you're on an iPad and sometimes you're on a laptop. If you save to the cloud, you maintain one file with all the layers and the edits and everything.
Sometimes you're on school computer and other times you're on personal computer.
Or that, yeah. So I'm gonna save to my computer. And it's giving me some options here. The default is that it wants to save it as an AI file, an Illustrator file. I'm going to switch that to PDF. I'm going to go down to PDF and choose PDF. Now, hold on. It's got use artboards automatically checked. So I have the option of doing all of the artboards. So it would be a 2-page PDF document. Or there's a range option and I can tell it which of the 2 artboards I want to save. And if you have a lot of them, you can do, like, say I had 5 artboards here, which is perfectly reasonable. I've dealt with more than that. If you
Max like 99.
I have no idea. If I say like 1 through 3, comma 5, that would give me 1, 2, 3, would skip the 4th, and it would include the 5th. So you can arrange the numbers that way. I don't know if you do. I have no idea. If I did 5, comma 1 through 3, would it put artboard number 5 as the first page? I've never
Test it out.
tried. I don't really want to right now. But maybe you'll keep that in mind and someday it'll come in handy and it'll work, or maybe it won't. I don't know. So I'm going to cancel that. So that's going to save a PDF of each one. There's also, let's say I don't want a PDF, you can, instead of save, you can use export. So I'm going to go File, Export, Export As. Export as. And now look at all the options we have here. PDF and PTSD. Did I just say PTSD?
You said PDF.
Okay, all right. PDF and PSD are there. So Photoshop, you can save it as a Photoshop file or a PDF. But now you have JPEG, you have PNG, bitmap, and some other, you have TIFF, SVG, You have other options. So let's say I chose JPEG. I'm going to put these in, make a new folder, export test. Okay. Create, I'm gonna put them in this folder, and right now I had the first artboard selected, so that's all I would export. But if I wanted to export all of my artboards, let's say I had a whole like series of icons or something that I wanted it to save them all one after the other, I'm going to click on use artboards, and I'm going to say all. And what does suffix do? I don't know what suffix does. Huh. Okay. I'm gonna say all, I'm gonna say export. And it's giving me a chance to make it CMYK or RGB. I'm gonna choose RGB.
That makes sense for digital.
Yes, and I want high quality. I can choose a screen resolution. Okay, so it's asking me all these questions because I'm exporting, this is a vector file, but I'm exporting it as a GIF. So it's being what's called rasterized. It's being converted from vector graphics to an array, a grid of pixels. So we need to think about resolution. We're going to talk a lot more about resolution later. But screen resolution is about 72 pixels per inch. So the file size is smaller. Print can be about like 300. You can go as much as 600. But I'm gonna stick with 72 because I don't want to take up like space on my computer for this. And I'm gonna leave it there, but there's
5 minutes to rasterize.
I probably won't, but and then I'm going to say okay, and then let's go to the Finder and find that folder, export text. And here I have, one's called O1 and one is called O2. Didn't maintain the artboard name. Maybe there's a setting you have to use for that. I've seen it done. But anyway, but one thing I'm noticing about that is that if I really were exporting these images, like say I wanted to use them on a website, there's all this white space around it that's just like gonna be a drag to deal with when I'm positioning things, and and it's extra pixels that just make the file size larger because the file has to record, their position and their color and their bit depth and all of that good stuff. So sometimes you want to you want your artboard to be only as large as your art. So I could come in here and get the artboard tool and take the corners down and try to get it just perfect. But what if I did it and I chopped off an edge or something like that? The nice thing about this is like once you have your artboard tool, if you have a piece of art or a group, if you have a bunch of objects together in a group that represent like their own object, you can just click on it and it will make, all I did was just click on that star and it made one more artboard inside this other artboard, which I don't need anymore. But it's perfectly sized to that art. So then I can click on this artboard and delete it and do the same thing over here. And then now I have, two artboards that are perfectly sized. I'm not wasting any space. And I can export those as, whatever formats, whatever file format I need. Yes. Yes. Any questions? That's kind of it for, we're gonna go over file formats in much more depth, but I just wanted to show you that you can have multiple artboards and you can have many art, or you were saying there was a limit to the number of artboards. I don't know.
It's like 90.
Okay. Once you get into, if you're laying out like a magazine or something,
InDesign.
yeah, you don't want to use Illustrator for that.
999.
900. Yeah, you don't want to use Illustrator if you're gonna have like so many artboards. InDesign is so much better at handling multi-page layouts. So, okay. Very good. Are we ready for some Photoshop magic?
Yeah.
Yeah? Okay. Yes.
You put like a Photoshop file into like a program.
Into a what? Well, some programs will take a Photoshop file and some won't. Illustrator will. Illustrator will, and I demonstrated this in another class. If let's see, let me make another artboard here. I'm gonna hit V to get back to my direct selection tool. I can go into File and choose Place. And I can choose, where was that doggy that we were looking at?
Stop.
What was his? It was a PSD file.
It was so silent.
It was so silent. Oh, it's right here at the top. So here's a Photoshop file, and I just click on there and I click place, and then I get this cursor. I can either just click, or I can click and drag. I prefer to just click to maintain the resolution and the aspect ratio. So I'm just going to click on there. I don't need this anymore. And I have this PSD file. You can bring PSD files into InDesign. I'm sure like After Effects and Premiere Pro, I'd be surprised if they didn't support it. Yeah, pretty much any Adobe file. I don't know about other things like Procreate. If you can bring PSD files into that, it just all depends on the software.
There's converters you can use on. PSD.
There's always a converter somewhere. But the nice thing about like this one, this is a PSD file. If I hold down Option and I double click on it, it opens it up in its native format. Pretty cool, right? So I could place another Illustrator file and do Option double click, and it would open that. And then I can do something like turn this background back on, hit save, go back to Illustrator, and it's alerting me that there have been changes to the file. Do I want to update it? And I'm going to say yes. And you can connect those two files really easily. It's really a time saver instead of having to go back to Photoshop, save it, place it all over again. They're kind of like connected. So it's really, does that answer your question? Yeah, okay, all right. Okay. Photoshop. Hey, goodbye, Beagle. We're done with you. Okay, so let me I'm gonna get rid of this. Put this down here. Okay. Welcome to Photoshop. Looks like Adobe, doesn't it? Looks kind of familiar. Just like in oh, is this not even, oh, or just took me back to, okay, let me no. That's what I want. Okay. So just like in Illustrator, you can customize the interface however you want. There's so many options, so many different panels you can have open, and depending on what you're doing, you might need this, you really don't need that. A photographer is going to need this, a designer is going to need that. You can totally customize this, but for our sake, so that we're on the same page, this icon, the rectangle shaped icon in the upper right, if you hover over it, it says choose a workspace. We're going to go with essentials. I'm actually going to hit reset essentials just in case I changed anything, which I did. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, I just encourage you to do that so that you're looking at the same screen that I am. So over here, we've got our toolbar. So we've got a move tool, marquee tool, lasso tool. We'll go through most all of these. Whenever you hover over them, you get what's called a rich tooltip, where it wants to play you a little video on how to use that tool. If you get sick of these, you can go into the preferences or the settings and turn them off. There's an option in there somewhere. It's called rich tooltips. I've been meaning to turn mine off. It's kind of getting on my nerves, but okay. And then we have another sort of side toolbar here, which it's kind of empty right now. It only has two things in it, but we can populate that with more options as we go along. And then we've got all these panels here. So we have a properties panel, which is very useful. Properties is, like the major settings for the document. So it's giving me the width in pixels, the height in pixels, the orientation, the color mode, bit depth. There's rulers and grids that we can turn on. And then layers. Hopefully this looks familiar to you. Layers. In Photoshop, you use layers a lot. Illustrator will let you get away with just dumping a whole bunch of stuff on one layer and forgetting about it. Not Photoshop. Photoshop, you gotta have a separate layer for this. Oh, you want to modify the color? Well, you're gonna have to make a whole nother layer for that. And you're just gonna have so many layers. I don't know what the limit is. I'm sure Janelle can look it up. And we have channels. So right now we're in RGB, red, green, blue. This is showing us, if I'm going to hold option and click on the red. Oh, so I've turned off the other layers and I'm looking at this grayscale image. And what this represents is the thing to remember um, in Photoshop, when we talk about masks and channels and things like that, is that white reveals, black conceals. So this is showing me the range of blue that is being pumped into this image. So the white is telling me there's gonna be a lot of blue up there. The dark areas tell me that there's not gonna be a lot of color there. And I can take a look at the different, here's the green,
Know the actual layer.
here's the red, what is it?
8,000.
8,000 layers. I'm
Yeah.
sure somebody's hit it. I'm sure it's been done.
Literally a theory post that says I need to have more than 8,000 layers.
Oh my God, can you imagine the size of that file? But I've turned on all the channels now, and now all of those colors combined are giving me the full color image of this thistle. And then there's a path palette. This is where you can incorporate vector shapes. We'll talk about that later, not today. It can be useful. You can have multiple documents open, so I can open let's see. Go find another. Okay, so they're tabbed up here. I can go back and forth, but you can also tile them if you want to, and look at them at the same time. So if you go to Window, Arrange, we've got tile all vertically, tile all horizontally, 2 up, 2 up, 3 ups not available because we only have 2 images, or consolidate also tabs. So if I said tile all horizontally, it's putting them both in Windows like that. And then if I wanted to get rid of that, I would say consolidate all to tabs, which I'm going to do. Moving around in the document is similar to Photoshop. So Command or Control plus zooms you in, minus zooms you out. There's also a zoom tool over on the side here that you can click, or you can just hit the letter Z. And then if you click once, it jumps by a certain percentage. If you click and hold, it zooms and it zooms and it zooms until you actually see the actual pixel grid. I'm using my trackpad with 2 fingers now to move around, but another way to move around is there is a hand tool right above the magnifying glass, the zoom tool. But if you hold down spacebar, you temporarily get that hand tool, and you can click and drag and throw, and it'll just keep on moving with momentum. You can, if you don't like that, you can turn it off in settings if you don't want that to happen. And then again, Command 0 fits everything on the page, and Command 1 goes to 100%. And what that means is that now 100%, you're viewing every single pixel. Every single pixel is being represented on your screen in the grid that is your screen, and all the diodes that are arranged to show color and light. So, there is also, I'm gonna go back to Command 0. There's also a window called Navigator. I'm gonna open that up. I mean, not a it's a window, panel, whatever you want to call it. And there's a slider here where you can zoom in and zoom out. If you want, there's a little red box on top of the thumbnail. You can take that box and drag it here or there or wherever you want. So there's many ways to navigate your way around a photo, but my favorites are Command 0 to get back to full screen, Command plus, Blend minus, and then my trackpad to move around, or space bar and then click and drag to move around. And then I'm going to close this. Notice now that I opened that navigator, and then I click the little arrow, now we have a couple more icons on our right side toolbar. So as you start opening new panels, you can collapse them into this this right side toolbar, and you can sort of customize that. If you get to a point where you have like the ultimate setup, like this is my dream workflow, like this is the way I want to work all the time, I want my panels like this all the time, I want this, you can save it. And how do you do that? Right here, under the workspace icon here, you go new workspace, it'll let you name it. And oh, you can even make your own keyboard shortcuts, and woohoo. Yeah, so you can totally customize this baby. It's totally fine. Okay. Now we need to talk about, we're going to get into some technical stuff. We're going to talk about file formats. Okay. So we can break down file formats for Photoshop into like 3 different categories. We've got capture formats, working formats, and output formats. Okay. Let's talk about capture formats. This is more for photographers, but if you've ever used like a digital camera that's not your phone, okay, like a Canon or a Nikon or something like that, you have these certain options on how you want to save the photo. You can always set it to JPEG, okay, but they also have RAW formats. Here's the difference. Okay, the difference is compression. Okay, you might care, you might not care. It all depends on what you're working on. But we've got two versions. We've got lossy, and then we've got lossless. Okay. Lossless doesn't use compression. The image you capture in that camera, you've grabbed every piece of information that camera is able to capture, every pixel, and it's saved every single one. And you have all that information that you can work with. Lossy, but it makes a really big file size. It's a lot of information, especially if you're dealing with, you know, megapixel images. Lossy is, if it's a lossy file format, it means that it's using some sort of algorithm that is actually throwing out information. So it's capturing the information and then it's compressing it. JPEG is probably the best example of this. But I'm not knocking JPEG because JPEG is a brilliant algorithm. It does a really good job. That's why all your phones use it. You can take these really big pictures and the quality's still really good, mostly. You know, we wouldn't have, the internet wouldn't be what it is if they hadn't invented the JPEG file format. So basically what it's doing, and I'm gonna totally simplify this, all right? You've got a grid of pixels, right? Depending on the quality settings, you could set it to a high quality or you could set it to a low quality and get different file sizes. But let's say it remembers the color of that pixel, the color of this one, this one, this one, and this one, okay? And then it throws away all these other ones. When you reopen that file, what it's doing is it's looking at, it's got to fill in this pixel here. So it's looking at the color value of all its surrounding pixels, and it's using some sort of algorithm to sort of guess what color that would be. And it does a really good job. That's why JPEGs are everywhere. They're all over the web, they're on your phone, they're, but you know, you're a professional photographer printing very large images or putting things into art books and, you know, you need really good prints. You're gonna want to work in some sort of raw format where you're not losing that information. You can always scale it down later, you know, so that's why it's good to, like, if you are using like an SLR camera, shoot in RAW, you can always turn it into a JPEG later. But if you're shooting JPEG, you can't turn it into a RAW. You can't go back to the moment in time and snap that picture and grab the light from, you know, the flower petals, and you can't do that. Like,
Not
just
that.
not, yeah. The thing with raw images is that they are what's called proprietary. So that means that different companies have different formats and they keep them secret. So Canon has its own proprietary raw format. Nikon has its own. But there's also one called DNG. I don't actually know what that stands for. I think Apple created, no, or was it Adobe? I think it's Adobe. Adobe created DNG. It's a raw file format. It's non-proprietary. So you can use it on all different kinds of platforms. But Photoshop will work with Canon RAW, Nikon RAW, for pretty much all raw file formats. So this is these are your capture formats, the ones where you snag the image. Then we've got our working file formats, and you can think of these as your master file. Okay, so these are the files that you can really get in and edit. They've got layers, they've got masks, you might have text in there, you might have links to other documents. So Photoshop PSD would be a working file format. TIFF can save Photoshop options. The difference between the two is the size they allow. TIFF can get twice as large as a PSD. So if you are working on a huge file and it won't save, switch it over to a TIFF, it might work. And then you've got Adobe Cloud documents, which I kind of just showed you right now that it, when I was exporting, it was asking me, or save as, I can't remember. It was asking me if I wanted to save it to Adobe Cloud. So like, again, if you're going back and forth between like an iPad or a laptop, or there are collaborative tools with Adobe Cloud documents, so you can share it with people and you both have access to it. And I've never actually done that. Maybe we should try that in this class. That would be fun. The other nice thing about the Adobe Cloud documents is that when you save it, it just saves the little edits that you just did in that sitting. So it doesn't take as much time to save if it's a really, really large document. So, so yeah, so when you're working on something professionally, you're starting with a capture format. Then you've got your master file, but then you eventually need to move on to an output format. And this is like, you're done, you're ready to print, you're ready to put it on the web. You know, you can't put a PSD file on the web, you can't put a TIFF on the web. You can, if you're printing, you can send those formats to a printer. Usually they're able to deal with them, but to be safe, all those layers that you are working with that gave you all that flexibility to manipulate the image have got to be flattened down. So you always want to make sure you keep a copy of the working output, the working file format, not output, the working format, and then you make a copy that is your output format. JPEG, again, very popular because of the lower file size. It's perfectly fine for prints if you keep the quality high. Okay, so when you're saving a JPEG, there's, there'll be like a slider that, low quality, high quality, you choose. Again, flat, no layers. These output formats don't have layers. PNG is it's a single layer format. The difference between a JPEG and a PNG is that it supports transparency. Okay, so I showed you before in Photoshop channels, right? I showed you got the red, the green, the blue channels that control the amount of color in every single pixel, right? There's another channel that we can manipulate, and that's called the alpha channel. The alpha channel controls the transparency. So we're going to learn how to take an image and apply a mask to it so that certain parts are transparent. So we can isolate one object. We don't just have to plunk a rectangle down on a background. We can have it have different edges. It can even be feathery and soft, and PNG can do that. And PNG you can use on the web. So JPEG and PNG are very common for web use. GIF has pluses and minuses, okay? One thing about it, it does have a compression method, but it's not a lossy compression. It's not throwing information out. But you are limited to 256 colors versus something like 16 million. Okay, so it's not really good for photographs. You're gonna get this grainy kind of effect, but it's really good for something like just flat graphics on like a white background or colored background or something like that. And it can do transparency, but it's what's known as a 1-bit transparency. So the pixel is either fully opaque or fully transparent. PNG, you can have a pixel that's kind of like 50% transparent. So it's how you can get those soft edges and make sure that everything's smooth. GIF, not so much. But the fun thing about GIF is you can make animations. We love our GIF animations, right? And we'll play around with that in Photoshop later. Not today, but so you know, every situation, you got to think about it, choose the right file format, and move forward. So, now let's talk about bit depth. Okay, what's a bit? What's a byte? What's a bit? Let's talk about a bit. A bit is a single piece of binary information, a 1 or a 0. I'm sure you've heard before that computers just read 1s and 0s. That's how they communicate. That's why it's called binary. Bi meaning 2, 1 or 0. And they just are really good at, it's like Morse code, right? Beep, 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 beep. They just know the code. All these little, it's not literally a 1 or a 0. I mean, it kind of is, but it's actually a pulse of energy, a pulse of electricity. So current on means 1, current off means 0. That's how computers interpret the world, like 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0. And they know that this sequence of 1s and 0s means the letter B. Okay, then it's just code, Oh, this 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 0, 1 means the letter R, and it just gets bigger and bigger from that. So bit depth, each pixel has to be encoded with some sort of color value, right? So so if it's 1 bit, you only get 2 choices, on or off, black or white or whatever color is assigned. But if it's 8-bit, then every pixel has 8 1s and 0s to encode the color. And if you do binary math, 8 1s and 0s, your possible combinations are 256. Okay, so if you have an image that's in 8-bit, then your red channel has 256 possibilities, blue is 256, green is 256, and you can make like a lot of colors from that. I mean, a lot. You can do a lot with that. Oh, you want me to do actual binary math on the board for you? I had to do that in grad school. Okay, so bit depth and color mode kind of go together. Color mode determines how many colors can be represented based on the number of channels they contain.
All the colors in this.
Oh boy, you went 16-bit. There's 16-bit. There is 32-bit too. 16-bit, okay, if 8-bit gives you 256 shades, 16-bit gives you 65,000 shades.
I said all of the colors in existence.
That's not actually physically possible.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So color mode, okay, so there's different color modes that we can set our file to, and we can switch back and forth between them. We've got grayscale. So grayscale would mean there's just one channel, you know? And there's not RGB, there's just one channel, it's just one channel. Every pixel has 256, if it's 8-bit, that's 256 shades of gray that it can choose from. And that's pretty good. Like you can, I mean, you can make some really amazing imagery with an 8-bit grayscale image. Like it's kind of enough, you know. Then we have indexed. Indexed is what the GIF uses. So there's actually only 200. It doesn't really have channels like it doesn't have channels like an RGB file has. So basically it's like marker. The way a GIF works, no, wait, I'm thinking about something. That's compression. That's not great. Okay, so index is basically for GIF. And then there's RGB, which is the 3 channels. There are other color modes, but these are kind of the ones that we will be working with. There's also CMYK, which we talked about for printing. C for cyan, Y for yellow, M for magenta, K for black. I don't know why. Why not? Because B has been taken. But I mean, well, you'll see here, I'll show you in a second why, you know, working in RGB is a good way to go. Let me move this up. Okay, bit depth and color mode. So here are some, oops, I need to go there. So this is a grayscale image. Those are your 250 shades of gray. Does pretty good. This is an indexed color. You can't, if you get closer to the monitor, you'll see that it's kind of grainy in like these highlight areas compared to the smoothness of the RGB image from a distance. And it's always something you kind of need to think about too. When we're talking about resolution and bit depth and all that. Consider how far away is the object going to be? Is somebody going to be holding it up to their face? Are they going to be looking across the room, or is it going to be on a billboard on the freeway? Like these things are going to inform your decision on which modes to use. My cough won't go away.
Did you say you had a
I talked to the doctor, and the doctor's like, well, use your inhaler.
The doctor was like, it's not COVID, so get out of here.
I'm like, if the system would have let me come into the office and you could listen to my lungs, maybe this would be different. But I could only get a phone interview. Kaiser, yeah.
Not St. Agnes Urgent Care.
Oh, no. Okay. So, yeah, so those are the three. And then, so color space, color mode and color space is kind of confusing, what's what. There are different color, kind of at a loss, like what's the difference between a color mode and a color space? It's about algorithms and encoding information. But basically, so let's imagine that this thumb looking spectrum of color there is all the colors that we can see with the human eye. I mean, obviously, it's not because it's on a screen, and that would be actually physically possible in this universe, but let's just pretend. Okay. If you are in the sRGB color mode, don't ask me what that stands for. I know what RGB stands for. I don't know
What
what
does
that
it
stands
stand for?
What does it stand for? Look it up now.
Oh.
This triangle represents the colors that you can replicate. And the nice thing about it is it's a small file size. So if you're doing images for the web, you really want to keep your files as small as possible. So, so for the
RGB, Indiana University.
what? Okay.
Okay.
So sRGB is, it's a very common space. A lot of times when you just grab a JPEG and you open in Photoshop, it'll automatically open up in
Standard RGB.
standard RGB. Thank you. And it's fine. You can do a lot with that. But there's also Adobe RGB, which obviously gives you more colors to work with. So it's very popular within Photoshop, to maintain color fidelity of your images in Photoshop. ProPhoto, it can contain more colors than a monitor can display. I don't understand that. I totally don't.
You got like
What-
special.
Why? I don't know. But sometimes if you have like a raw image from an SLR camera or something like that, and you open it up in Bridge or Lightroom or Photoshop, it'll come in with the ProPhoto color mode. And then we have CMYK. And you can see that it's actually the most limiting of all the color spaces.
It's because printers only operate with 3.
It's
color
just
structures.
it's just about the physics of ink and paper and light. And remember we talked about additive versus subtractive color? Like CMYK is subtractive color because you have a piece of paper with ink on it. The white light comes down, full spectrum white light. It absorbs some of the spectrum, and then the rest gets bounced into your eye, into your retina. So it's actually subtracting color, whereas
The price.
diodes on a screen are emitting light energy. And the brighter they are, the brighter the color. So it's actually adding more color depending on the
Price
the
per
pixel.
ink cartridges. We should have more coverage.
No crap. Oh, that's my last slide. Okay. Any questions? Oh wait, is it my last slide?
It's your slide.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Any questions? It's a lot of information. I know you guys aren't necessarily photographers, but you're going to be dealing with a lot of photography in your career as you put together layouts and posters and websites and all of that. So it's really important to, you know, you want to, whatever photo you're working with, maintain its integrity as much as possible. So understanding, you know, bit depth and color mode and color space, you know, will help you with that. So I have a photo here. I should probably show you where in Photoshop you can control these things. Right now, if we go to image and then there's mode. And you can see right here, it's telling me that I'm in RGB and I'm at 8 bits. That's the bit depth is 8 bits. So, and that gives me about 16 million colors. It's not bad. Not bad. But if you're like a hardcore photographer, you know, you might want more than that. And then I can change that to grayscale. I can change it to indexed color. Lab color, I have never used. I've never used lab color. Don't know anything about it. And multi-channel, not totally sure. Yeah, so if you wanted to change the color mode, it's in the image menu under mode. You wanted to change the color space. Oh geez, where is that? Oh boy. Image. It's under color settings. Oh, I'm never gonna find it. It's under color settings. And where is color settings? Isn't there a search bar? Yeah, let's do a search bar. See if I can get it. Color setting. Color settings, edit. Okay, I just searched for it. I still don't know where it is, but I got to it. It's in the menu somewhere. It's in the search bar. It's so smart, AI. So right here it says working spaces, RGB, CMYK, gray, and spot. So here under RGB, there's a lot of different ones to choose from, but we do have Apple RGB and Pro Photo. If you wanted to change to one of those, you could do that. CMYK is not an option here, so you would have to do that in color mode. Okay, I'm gonna cancel out of that. Thank you, search bar. That was very helpful.
Oh, it's under edit.
It's under edit.
Yeah.
Color settings. There it is. Thank you. Oh my God. Okay. So far so good? See, it's 7:12. Let's talk about resolution. Okay. Okay, so let's just take this image right here, this image of a thistle. What resolution is it at? This really matters. Resolution and size kind of influence each other. So what I'm going to do to inspect this, is I'm going to go to image I'm gonna go to image size. Okay. And it's giving me a lot of information here. First of all, right here under dimensions, it's telling me how many pixels wide and how many pixels high. And what does this drop down do? I can change it to inches if I wanted to. Let's do that. Just say we're gonna print this. So this would print at about almost 9 inches wide. Okay. And I can change these units of measurement as well. Width and height. They're locked right now, so that if I, right now they're locked. If I click on that, they come unlocked, but I kind of want it to stay locked because I don't want to mess up the proportions. I don't want to skew it. But like if I changed this number, the height would proportionally change to go to go along with it. I want to bring your attention to this option right down here where it says resample. Very important. Resample. Right now it's checked. I'm going to uncheck it. I'm going to show you what happens. Now, once I unchecked it, now the width, the height, and the resolution are all locked into place. So if I change the resolution from 300, what that stands for is pixels per inch, or sometimes it's called DPI in print, dots per inch, because you're making plates that have a dot pattern on them and then printing them on top of each other. But I'm going to uncheck resample, and now if I change this to 72, which is sort of like web, now look at the dimensions of that image. 37 inches wide. Okay, instead of almost 9. But the image size has not changed. The pixel dimensions have not changed. All we're doing is saying how tightly packed we want those pixels to be. So per inch, so 1 square inch. Do we want 72 pixels in there? If it's a screen, we're only going to be able to see 72 pixels. So there's no point in putting 300 pixels in there. You're just making someone download an image that they can't see all the pixels of. And it's a waste of time and resources. But if we if we say 72, it's going to take all those pixels and spread them out. So think of it as like, let's say you had a polka dotted balloon, rubber balloon. And when it's deflated, all the dots are really close together. And as you blow it up and blow it up, they spread out and they spread out and they spread out. Okay, it works like that. So by not choosing to resample, I'm not losing any information. I can go back to 300. I could go back to 72. I could go back to 300. I would still have all of the pixel information. It's just organized differently. That's all there is. But if I do choose to resample, it's going to, wait, let me go back to 300. If I do choose to resample, it's going to either throw pixels away or invent new pixels. Kind of risky because, you know, like I said, Photoshop can't go back to the moment in time where you took that photo and got the light that bounced off the waterfall and, like, it has to just invent something. So if you take a very low quality image and you bump up the resolution, it's not gonna look very good. There are algorithms now in Photoshop that do a pretty decent job. In the past, like, the golden rule was never upsample. Like, never resample and increase the resolution, never, ever, 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 ever do it. Now they've got some decent algorithms that you can work with. I wouldn't push it too far. I wouldn't upsample by like 300% or something like that. Like, it's just gonna, your image is gonna look blurry and just yuck. But we downsample. So now if I change the resolution here, I have resample selected. If I change the resolution to 72, now look what happens to my file size. I'm at 176, where it was at 1.76. It was at 30.5 megabytes before. So I've really reduced my file size, but I've also lost a lot of information. Okay. So what resolution do you want? Well, I've already said that, if you're working with for screen, you want to keep it low, like 72. If you're working with an image that's going to be printed, there are different factors involved, okay? So you have to think about the method of printing that is being involved. There's a thing called LPI, lines per inch. Is that what it stands for? Something like that. It depends on the quality of paper. So like if you're printing for a newspaper, like newsprint, very low quality paper. Like once, it's putting down, patterns of dots to simulate color, halftones. That kind of paper, once the ink hits it, it just kind of tends to spread. And if it's a really dense DPI or PI, you might get some like blobby areas on it. But if you're printing for like a really nice art book or a glossy magazine or something like that, you've got better quality paper, maybe better quality inks, you can afford to go up to 300. If you're printing for inkjet, you can go even a little bit further. You can go like to 360 dpi. If you're printing what's called continuous tone, so you're sending like a photograph to a lab to be printed on photo paper, usually you would want to ask the lab what resolution they prefer, because it depends on their machines. But 300 is good. I know people who work in 600 all the time. I don't know if that's necessary. I think once you hand your files over to the printer always goes and takes your files and tweaks them and makes little changes. So, they might just throw out that 600 and print at 300. But that's a good rule of thumb. 72 for screens, 300 for CMYK printing. Unless it's like newspaper, then you probably want like 150 or 200 or something like that. But this is something where you always want to have a conversation with your printer to make sure you're getting the best quality you can. Okay. Couple more things and then I'll let you go. I know this is just a lot of technical information. in one day, but we haven't even done any designing or fun stuff yet. But you gotta know this stuff, because, you know, what if you put all this effort into working on a file and then you realize you have a crappy resolution? You just wasted all your time. So you need to be prepared before you go in to design mode, you know, to make sure that you've got, you know, a solid file in front of you. I'm going to introduce you to the history panel. Okay. I'm going to go to window and I'm going to go to history. And the thing with Photoshop is you want to be able to experiment, you know, you want to be able to try this and then try this and then try this and then try this. But then you want to go back to where you started. And, you know, so we're going to learn different techniques on non-destructive editing so that we can try out all sorts of different modes, but not ruin our original image. And we can always go back to that image. And the most basic one is the history panel. So here, I'm going to take this. I've opened it here and it's got the snapshot and then it's got open. So open was my first action that I did to this file. Okay, let's do something else. Let's say adjustments. No, let's do filter. Let's stylize it. I'm just gonna do some really crappy stuff here. I'm gonna solarize it. Okay, now it looks solarized. Cool. Now I'm going to, we haven't gone over any of these. I'm just messing around. What did I do before? I usually don't do it this way, so I'm a little lost. I could blur it. I could distort it. I'll do another stylized and we will do like an oil paint effect. Okay, cool. Let's do another one. Layer, no, filter. Go to filter gallery, why not? Glowing edges. Okay, so I've done a bunch of crap to this image. I can always do undo, 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 but the history panel is nice because it allows me to see and go specifically back to the step that I wanted to start again on. And once you have something that you think you kind of like, but you want to play around a little more, you can take what's called a snapshot with this little camera icon here. So now I have two snapshots. So now if I got rid of these, like I'm gonna delete, I'm gonna go back and go back to open. I can always go back to that snapshot. The thing is like if I go back to open and then I do something else, it's gonna drop all of those things. You know, it's like going back in time, you're affecting the future. So if I go back and I don't know, let's liquefy this. And say okay. Now I've got a liquefy history instance and all those other ones that I did disappeared. But I took a snapshot so I can actually go back to it. But I don't have all the layers in that snapshot. So And once I save this file, it doesn't save the history. No, it doesn't. But we're gonna learn other methods of dealing with that. But the history panel can be very handy in going back. And then let's just do one more thing. Right now I'm in JPEG mode. Okay. Like I said before, you want to make sure you have a master copy, a working copy. So if I had other layers in here, like this is in the way. I'm gonna add an adjustment layer where I mess with the curves and the levels. I'm sorry, levels. So I just created an adjustment layer, which we will learn. If I just save this as a JPEG, it would flatten these two layers. I couldn't go back and adjust those levels. So what I want to do is I want to go file and I want to go save as. And it's automatically going to assume I want a Photoshop file. And there's these other ones too. There's TIFF right there. And you can save to cloud documents. But yeah, I want to save this as a PSD so that I have it in the future. And you always want to maximize compatibility. So I'm going to click this whole don't show again thing. Goodbye. So now if I close this and I open it again, I can I'll be right back where I started, except for my history panel. Now, but let's say I'm in right now, it says .psd up in the tab here. I want a copy of it as a JPEG, okay? So I could go save as or save a copy, and that would work, but it's actually better to go to export. For some reason, they incorporated new algorithms into the export option and not the save a copy option. I don't know why. Yeah, they just want to mess with us. So I'm going to go to export as, and then I get this lovely preview, and it's telling me, what do you want? File format, do you want a PNG, a JPEG, or a GIF? I'm going to go with JPEG. I can actually change the image size right in here. I can adjust the quality of the JPEG compression. I can adjust the canvas size. It says convert to sRGB. I'm already in sRGB, so that doesn't really matter. I don't know if I could scale it. What's the difference between scaling it and adjusting the image size? I don't actually know. But this will export for me a JPEG. And I'll show you later, it's a slightly different process for exporting for the web, for screens and stuff, that you actually have even more options dealing with compression and file size and things like that. So I'm going to cancel this. I don't actually want to export that, but I don't really do very much to it. So we got this one. And any questions? Any requests, like something you really want to know how to
Is there a
do?
way to lock the transparency of a layer? Or is that just like a clipping list thing?
Lock?
The transparency, like if you have like a square and you wanna change like a color or pattern on the square, but you don't wanna go outside the boundaries and you lock like the transparency.
I would have to see an example. I'm not sure what,
Clipping mask would basically do that same thing.
because the transparency, the opacity applies to the whole layer unless you make a mask.
Yeah, this was,
So you're asking if you can lock a mask.
well, I'm asking if you could lock a layer so you don't have to.
What?
And
I don't know what you're talking about. Come up with an example and I'll,
because I know other apps,
I can't really think of a use case for that.
you wanna draw on the layer and you don't wanna create a clipping mask. But you don't wanna go outside the shape you already have on the layer. So you just lock the transparency and you don't create other shapes on that layer.
I'm still not getting it. I'm sorry. We'll talk later. Okay, that is your intro to Photoshop. We're gonna do so much more. We're gonna do filters and blend modes and masks. We're gonna do a project with photo compositing and do crazy stuff with type and whatever the hell comes into my head. Okay? Okay, I'm gonna turn off Zoom.